258 continued. After supper, Caddie and the boys slipped out to the barn. Robert Ireton sat on the milking stool, tilted back against the barn, and strumming his banjo. His voice was plaintive tonight. He was singing about a beautiful maiden who had died of a broken heart and had been buried under a weeping willow tree. Caddie sat on the loose pile of hay, her arms clasping around her knees. Above her the dark sky glittered and sparkled with thousands of stars. The Milky Way was a broad white path across the sky. There was the North Star, and another star which she loved because it was so bright. She did not know its name, but she had always called it hers. There would be stars in England, but what would they be so bright, so beautiful? The smell of clover and new hay tugged at her heart. Would anything in England smell as sweet? And when Indian John came back to find the treasures he had left with her, would she be gone? Here under the bright stars, while Robert strummed and sang, Caddie knew that her old wild past was ended. But suddenly she knew too that she wanted the future, whatever it might hold, to be here in the country that she loved, and not among the strangers in the strange land. Pigeons and peacocks. The members of the family appeared on time for breakfast the next morning, and everyone wore an air of strangeness and expectancy. They knew that today Father would make his decision about going back to England, and until the decision was made they felt ill at ease and somehow like a group of strangers sitting together at a familiar breakfast table. Only Annabel was perfectly at ease. "Tom," she said, looking at him with a new interest in her bright eyes, when you are an English lord, you must not forget your little cousin Annabel." "If you mean that you've given up your Boston clergyman," said Tom bluntly, "you needn't count on me, Annabel. I've got my girl all picked." "Tom, what nonsense," said Mother. "Go and eat your porridge." I know," buzzed Hetty. Tom reached hastily for the bread, and by some mysterious accident upset Hetty's glass of milk into her lap, so that the object of Tom's affections was never publicly revealed. During the confusion of mopping up Hetty, Caddie sat silent. She had dreamt last night about England. There had been peacocks and towers and moats, and it had seemed that the Woodlawn children were to be presented to the Queen, but then all the others had vanished and only Caddie had gone alone, and then she had found herself holding the hand of a little boy. Such a funny little boy with a sailor suit and a white hat and red hair, and the little boy had been crying because he was hungry. And when they had reached the Queen's palace, there had been a great barred gate, and through the gate they could see that the Queen had peacocks too, but they could not get through the gate, and then soldiers had come and driven them away, and Caddie had wakened up and found that it was morning. Father's voice broke through the memory of her dream. Caddie turned and looked at him, and she thought that he was nicer sitting thus at the head of his simple table than he could ever be in another place. "I have been thinking," he said, "that you children are old enough to have some part in the decision which we must make today. It would hardly be fair for me alone, or for Mother and me, to say, without consulting you, either that you must give up your American citizenship and return to England, or that you should remain here, giving up a good deal of money and a high position in England. After all, Mother and I have already lived half of our lives, and they've been worth the living, haven't they, Harriet?" Mother smiled tremulously and nodded at him. "But you young ones have all of your lives before you, and you already have some ideas of what you wish to make of them. It would be a pity for someone else to make a wrong decision for you, so I think it best that we should take a family vote. Since we are still on American soil, and have always considered ourselves good Americans, we shall vote in the American way, by written ballot. That is, each child shall decide for himself what he wishes to do. Then, without telling anyone else what he has decided, he shall write 'go' or 'stay' on a piece of paper, which he shall then fold and place between the leaves of the family Bible in the parlor. We shall vote this afternoon at 4 o'clock, and in the meantime I want you to discuss it among yourselves, and to ask Mother and me as many questions as you like. And above all, I want you to think each for yourself what will be the best for my future. Where shall I be most useful and happy?" "Shall I vote too, Papa?" asked Minnie, climbing on to Mr. Woodlawn's knee and looking earnestly into his face. "Yes, you too, little Minnie. Every Woodlawn shall vote except Baby Joe. In his future we others must decide among us." At mention of his name, the baby bounced in his high chair and banged his spoon upon his tray. "You and I shall not be allowed to vote, Baby Joe," said Hannibal. "But never you mind. We'll be a little English gentleman before the day is over, and I'll be bound." "Goo goo," said the baby, and showed his two new teeth in a pink smile. Then, for a long time, Father spoke to them quietly and earnestly, like an impartial judge, setting forth the advantages and disadvantages of his move. He spoke of England more warmly than they had ever heard him speak before, picturing its beauties and the high place which they would be called to fill there. Then he spoke of America, and he did not say as many fine things of it as he had often said in the past, and Caddie knew why. It was because his heart belonged here in Wisconsin, and he did not wish to let his own preferences prejudice his children. But he did speak briefly of the freedom which belonged to them in a new country, and he had said that, although they might never be rich or famous in America, they would have the satisfaction of knowing that what they had made for themselves. "An inherited fortune is never quite one's own," said his father slowly. "And yet I want you to understand that money and power are also great things, and that great good may come of them, if they are wisely handled." Then he pushed back his chair from the table, and took his hat and went out to see that the horses had had a measure of oats. "Do you think the father wants to go back to be a lord?" asked Tom, as he and Caddie and Warren walked away to the lake. "I guess he doesn't want us to know what he wants," said Caddie in a low voice. "He'd rather we make up our own minds." "I can't see Father going back there where they treated him so badly once," said Tom. "Father's the kind of man who likes to do things for himself. I don't suppose that English lords mend clocks and feed horses and put locks on guns for Indians, do you?" "They don't have to," shouted Warren. "Well, Father doesn't have to either, but I think he'd miss it if he didn't do it." "I think that Father likes to be at the front of things," said Caddie. "He likes to be free and help build new places. I think he'd rather go on west than go back to an old country where everything is finished." Page 265.